Our next guest is Dr. Caroline Heldman. Caroline, welcome to the show. I'm such a huge fan of yours. Now, you're the Associate Professor of Politics at Occidental College, and you wrote a book called Rethinking Madame President about if a woman could ever be president. So let me ask you this. In the current political climate, which I don't know if you've heard, it's a little dicey.
Surprise!
Do you think that this is a time that we could get a woman in a White House anytime soon?
Well, I don't think that we will get a woman in the White House anytime soon. And Rethinking Madame President was actually a book that was put out, rushed to press, because so many people thought that Hillary Clinton was the nominee and that she would gain the White House, and she didn't. And as a political scientist who's been looking at Elizabeth Dole and even vice presidential media coverage, Ferraro and more recently Palin, it's very clear that there are major stumbling blocks, mostly because we don't take women seriously as leaders. And for that particular office, which is highly masculine, the top leadership position really in the world, there are a lot of mental barriers in addition to sexist media coverage that candidates have to overcome. So I don't think it's going to happen soon.
I didn't realize how sexist some of the talk was. Can you talk about that and how the climate with women in politics is just like outrageous?
Absolutely. So Hillary Clinton had a 501c3, a nonprofit set up to oppose her that spelled out the C word. She was called the B word. We talk about her dress and appearance, and it's not just Democratic women. We see the same with Sarah Palin. In fact, in my analysis, Sarah Palin's media coverage was the sexist that we've ever seen. If you compare Clinton and Palin and Elizabeth Dole and Geraldine Ferraro, the women who've made it to the vice president or the presidential tickets or competitions, she was ditzified, pornified. I mean, it was just awful, and it was happening on the left and the right. It was happening from male commentators primarily on the left and the right towards Democratic and Republican women. So it's not a partisan thing. And it's really hard to convince people of that, but men on the left are engaging in a lot of sexism in prime time.
Do you find that we keep talking about Clinton, we keep talking about Palin, and we talk about maybe Ferraro. And when I started looking into this, I thought, oh, are we going to talk about them again? And I thought, that's all we have. Right. That's all we have. And one of the problems, from what I understand, is that women are not going into the feeder positions into the presidential candidacy. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Well, I think it's actually even gotten worse in the last 10 years in that we don't socialize girls to be ambitious. In fact, in the last 10 years, we've seen this hypersexualization, right, of young girls, but also of women. And it's not, I'm not making this up. We see in study after study, whether it's film, television, music videos, the hypersexualization of women runs counter to us thinking of them as leaders and being ambitious. So we have millions of little girls not only seeing this sexist media coverage, but growing up in a society that tells them that their primary value is their body. We raise our little boys to view their bodies as these tools to master their environment, and we raise our little girls to view their bodies as these projects to be worked on. And so that runs counter to this idea of gaining power and ambition. So we don't have little girls in the pipeline. We don't have young women in the pipeline very, very much. And in corporate America and in politics, we've actually seen a stagnation in the number of women in positions of power, and even a decline at the state level, precipitous decline in the past 10 years. So the climate all around it's not rosy.
How do you see this changing?
Well, I think we need to seriously think about the fact that American culture has accepted the objectification of women and the pornification. It's everywhere. And it really has gotten worse in the last 10 years. And Gina Davis has been researching this for nigh 15 years. And her big tagline is, it's not getting better. So I think the first thing we need to do is acknowledge it's not getting better. And the second thing we need to do is ask ourselves why it is that our kids are spending more time with television than with their parents, and advertisers are banking their values. We need to pull that back.
Speaking of over-sexualization, I want to talk a little bit about Misrepresentation, the documentary. You were in that film. How do you feel personally about the success that that film's having and getting the word out?
Well, I'm just ecstatic because it means there's a need. So we show the film and it draws the links between the normalization of women's objectification, which is a fancy way of saying we see women and girls as sex objects. That and the fact that we don't respect them as leaders. And it's clear by the end of an hour, if you look at what's in popular culture, that link becomes clear, and then people want to act. And I was just at a screening with Reese Witherspoon and with Gina Davis and Sally Fields, and they were livid about the fact that they have been been talking about this for 30 years and it's only been getting worse. Right. So I'm happy that misrepresentation is really getting the word out, and there's this grassroots movement, and we're boycotting, right? If we see, you know, Sports Illustrated swimsuit edition,
right,
we boycott it. We see something offensive, we get it pulled off the air as much as a grassroots effort can.
Well, and I think one of the things that people are learning is that although advertisers are going for the 18 to 34-year-old male as a demographic because they're so hard to get, right, but they're not the ones that spend the money. It's women who spend the money. And the point of misrepresentation that I thought was so great is that's where our power is. Right. If we spend the money and we spend it on advertisers who support the equal treatment and presentation of women, we have it. We just have to get our act together and get motivated and have a point, a focus. And I think that's what's so great about misrepresentation is it puts it all in front of you and narrows that focus and says, here's what you can do, and it's still a problem. It's still a problem. Right. It makes me crazy, and it really, really does. And when I was researching you, and I keep saying, I keep staring at you because I'm like, she
loves you.
I do a little bit. I do
a lot.
Thank you.
I mean, who are we kidding?
I know, because what you're doing is important, and what you represent is everything I want young women to represent. I'm so honored to have you here on the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, my pleasure. And I think it's really great that you're modeling women getting along and not competing, because that's one of the awful side effects of living in a beauty culture that tells us we have to compete with other women. So it's lovely to see.